The forensic details surrounding the JonBenet Ramsey case remain layered with complexity. Among these is a subtle but potentially important observation made during the initial external review of the child's clothing. While much of the public focus has centered on visible injury and the cord on the crime scene, a quieter detail concerning markings on the lower garments raises unique and difficult questions about what may have occurred before or after the more widely discussed events. This reference appears early in the report under the external examination section on page 2, describing faint discoloration found on the inside area near the upper legs. Though small in size, about half an inch at the most, these markings, they have drawn forensic interest for what they may suggest about prior contact or activity. What makes this detail significant isn't just its presence, but the uncertainty it introduces. Was the source biological? Was it present before the primary trauma? Could it have resulted from post-mortem handling? These questions have been explored in tandem with coroner notes, early investigative observations, and follow-up lab testing. In particular, the wording used by Dr. John Meyer during the medical examination and the commentary from Detective Linda Arndt at the scene provide some interpretive support that the discoloration may have been biological in nature. Further examination by state and independent forensic labs later revealed a combination of the child's profile alongside genetic material from an unidentified male source unrelated to any family member. In this analysis, we're going to move through structurally the initial framing and language of the report, the notes from medical and law enforcement personnel, biological testing and interpretation of trace evidence, environmental or handling variables that may affect interpretation, and then we'll close out with a couple words of discussion. Stay tuned. Welcome back, everyone. I'm going to kind of jump into this. Before we jump in, I want to say thank you, huge thank you to Eve of West for the love and the support. Eve, hope you're doing all right. Thank you for sticking with me through this process. So I got to give you a great big hug. Got to squeeze you. Thank you once again, and I hope you enjoy this video. So let's talk about a particular part of the autopsy report. Okay, so here we are on page 2 of the autopsy report, the examiner's report here. And what you'll probably notice is that last time we talked about this area right here, and we didn't quite get to this area right here. And so essentially, according to the official report, the undergarment labeled Wednesday showed signs of discoloration, including areas of faint red staining near the intersection adjacent to the upper thigh. These measured up to about 0.5 inches in dimension. I just want to say, if my voice is kind of messing up, then please bear with me or whatnot. But yeah, I want to get into this. I want to dive into this portion. And so, section number 1, I kind of created, and I'll probably try to make this a little YouTube friendly, but kind of start with some of these, in that being, these are some of the clothes. Now, this is not the article or the item that I'm going to be discussing today, but it's just kind of reflective in nature of that kind of deal. There's another picture of the pants, a little blurry, but another picture of the long johns. And as some of you mentioned, and this is the star sequined shirt. So coming back to the Barbie nightgown and the pants, as some of you mentioned, these look like those for a boy. But anyways, it's neither here nor there. Kind of looking at the initial part of this report, the initial observations and wording of this medical report. And as you know, I'm going to try to code my language as much as I can. Um, so if I'm saying things like unalive or something like that, it's not that I'm afraid to say whatever. It's just I'm just trying to be YouTube friendly is essentially what I'm trying to do. So the initial observations and wording in the report. So the official medical report signed by Dr. John Meyer includes a brief but notable reference to several red areas of staining observed on the interior region of JonBenet's body. And the phrasing here is especially important. Rather than referencing sort of the visible, maybe active areas of what might be trauma centric, the term areas of staining suggests sort of like a surface level presence, possibly from the transfer or residue rather than any kind of tissue damage, I might say. So moving on, the choice of the word several also implies more than one instance. And so like you have these little dots and to put it in context, in the search warrants, and what I'm really talking about and pulling from, if you're confused, in the search warrants, we have the autopsy report, but Detective Linda Arndt was with John Meyer, the pathologist, and she noted that under the black light, there seemed to be some sort of body fluids on that were found on the on the body, and they couldn't. She first thought it came from a male, but when tested, she first thought it came from a male. That's under the fluorescent light. That's what she thought. The black light. That's what she thought. And Dr. Meyer, within the same sort of search warrant, was documented as saying, hey man, there looks like there's some like little red stains consistent with, maybe bleeding or something like that. And so we see in the autopsy report that he uses like several. There are several, and he's documenting that. And what I like to do is I like to see that documentation. If it's over here in the search warrant, can I see it show up in the official report? And so he says that he sees several like little like half-inch like little things. And it's interesting because these are like almost what I might imagine little specks of discoloration on the body. And he's noting that, but we have to understand or try to figure out, what is this from? Is it from like a transfer from somewhere? Or is it coming like maybe another article of clothing? Or is it coming directly from the source, as in maybe like this continued expulsion of fluids from from her as the sort of original source. And it kind of becomes important because you're saying, and what I'm finding here a result of continued expulsion, or is all of this cleaned up and these are just kind of like the remnants of that earlier expulsion in the area? So the choice to use the word several also implies more than one instance, introducing the possibility that this was not incidental or isolated. So this becomes more significant when paired with the observation recorded just prior in the report that the fabric showed signs, and we're talking about, in this case, the search warrant, that the fabric showed signs of prior wetness. That means that Dr. Meyer said the body looked wiped down. in that area, and specifically in the more sensitive area of the body. It looked, as he reported, like somebody had taken a rag to it and wiped it down. And I don't know what you call that, but I call that tampering. I call that tampering with the body. And according to what I understand, you're not allowed to do that, especially within the context of criminal activity or crime. You should not be tampering with the evidence. And so this is exactly, and you know, the more you look at this case, the more things come together. And it's weird because at first, everything seems like all over the place. You know what I mean? Like it seems like it's all over the place. I can't find whatever, but the more you look at it and you, I don't know if you like create a mental picture of what this criminal profile is supposed to be like, but it's hard to create a criminal profile from so many things that have been portrayed in the media and stuff like that, or things that have been portrayed by the Ramseys teams, by the people opposing the Ramseys and stuff like that. There are so many narratives, and if you don't dig into it deep, then it gets really murky to understand. It just gets really confusing. But once you dig deep enough, the language almost becomes kind of consistent, right? The language becomes consistent with somebody who is trying to cover something up. And you will begin to see evidence of, even if somebody is trying to hide, because you can't, you cannot dodge every single question unless you plead the fifth. So if somebody, and if I'm wanting to be truthful, or if I'm trying to be as truthful as possible, and somebody says, "What did you eat last night?" and maybe I'm wrong for going to Ruth Chris or something like that, and I didn't take my favorite, my best friend who loves going to Ruth Chris, and so if maybe he's like, "Hey man, where'd you go to eat last night?" "Oh man," or "What'd you have to eat last night?" "Oh man, I just picked up a steak." I didn't say I picked up a steak from Ruth Chris because I know I might get some backlash. But I cannot be dishonest because maybe I told him earlier on in the day that I was going to go get a steak, and he said, "Well, man, if you happen to go to Ruth Chris, or well, you guys don't know that one, but if you happen to go, then take me with you." And maybe I didn't want company or something like that, and so I just went by myself, and I sat there and ate and had a glass of wine by myself, right? Once he comes, he knows I ate a steak, but I don't tell him where I got it from. It's not a lie for me to say, "Hey, yeah, man, you know what?" And he says, "Did you get that steak last night?" "Yeah, man, I got the steak last night." It's not a lie, but you can't tell me, or you can't prove just yet that I went to Ruth Chris. And you can ask me, "Well, did you go to Ruth Chris? Did you go to Ruth Chris?" And I might say, "Oh, I can't remember, man. It was so late last night. I can't really remember if I went or not. But I feel like I picked it up from somewhere, because I know I didn't want to cook it." And so, this is going to sound annoying. Stick with me. I know it's going to sound annoying, but bear with me. Some of you who know the transcripts, you know what I'm talking about. I can't really remember. I'm not sure. I may have gone, and I can't say for certain if I went to Ruth Chris. Maybe I did, maybe I didn't. I just can't remember for certain. Gee, that was such a long time ago. I mean, maybe. I mean, it's definitely a place that I'd like to eat steaks from. So that wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility. But to say that I went last night, I just can't tell you. But yeah, you see how annoying that sounded? I didn't lie to you, and I didn't say, "Oh, I didn't go to Ruth Chris." I didn't lie to you. I left open the possibility that I would eat a steak, but I didn't tell you that I ate a steak from Ruth Chris. So you know I ate a steak, but you don't know when I ate a steak, and you don't know whether I got it from Ruth Chris. And so once you start looking at this information, though, like we looked at last time on the last video, or one of the last videos, this idea that, let me give you a more concrete example. This idea that things start to get a little funny. Like when I think it was Lou Smith was asking John in one of the interviews, hey, you sell, you do some selling or and all such as that, you know, you like to sell boats, and what got you into that? Oh, you know, with a friend, Woody and Bob and all such as that. Okay, fine. And you know, in Fleet as well. Okay, fine. Do you know how to tie knots? No, I don't really know how to tie a knot. And then you get to do, I know how to tie a few, not many not as much as I should. Okay, fine. Which ones do you know how to tie? And you come right out with it in 1998, and you say, probably a bowline knot, and then, you know, whatever, a square knot, I think is what it was, a square knot. But then Bodhi Technology Labs comes back and says, oh yeah, this garrote was tied in, this wrist, this wrist apparatus, let me say it like that. This wrist apparatus, was tied in a square knot. Now, if you, if you want me, if I want my friend, let me jump back to the steak example really quickly. If I want my friend to not think that I actually did go to Ruth Chris, I probably can't say, and I can't even think of what's on the menu at Ruth Chris right now, but I can't say, oh, they have this excellent, maybe this excellent Wagyu steak or something like that. That's, you know, has these components. I can't list those components and say, yeah, I ate a steak. Well, what did you have on your steak? I had these components. If those components are specific to Ruth Chris, then guess what? My friend might look at me sideways and be like, are you certain that you didn't go to Ruth Chris without me, bro? And I might say, oh man, I can't say for sure if I did or not, but you know, I know it sounds like I did, but you know, can't say for certain. But the language, the more times you use that language or something similar, then my friend is going to start picking that up and looking at me sideways. Right. And so that's what's happening a lot of times in this JonBenet Ramsey case. There's a lot of language of I could. And I was blaming Patsy, to be honest with you, but I think John is stepping in a little bit of hot water himself in some of these responses that are getting a little too close to the edge. And I know, but it definitely doesn't help absolve you of any responsibility. And if I'm Mary Lacey and I've exonerated these people, knowing some of this stuff in this report, then it's kind of weird that I did that, because there's plenty of things that make you a person of interest, at least. So that's all I'm saying. So when we come here and we think about, okay, we have, and they were mad at tabloids for putting this stuff out, but we have what looks like signs of physical activity against her. Then people, and we can't really find anybody. You got us looking for what seems like a ghost. I mean, guess what? We're going to start looking. I mean, they said they did the same thing to Susan Smith. We started looking at you funny. Susan, we can't find this black guy that you're describing. Where is he? Where did you say he came from? And then they start looking at you. And so fabric showed signs of prior wetness. It had been wiped down. And so once you start seeing language like it had been wiped down, well, who would do that? Why would they do that? I mean, their DNA is not really anywhere else. Like, why would they do that? And so, while interpretations may vary, this positioning in the report implies a sequence of findings that investigators later reviewed more closely. The fact that the dimensions of the markings were recorded as up to half an inch further reflects the examiner's attention to detail. And some people say that Dr. Meyer was on the Ramsey side. He was a Ramsey apologist. It don't matter. I don't care what you are. I'm still going to find it because you're going to tell him yourself. Further reflects the examiner's attention to detail. The inclusion of a precise measurement supports the idea that this detail stood out during the initial external review. Also noteworthy is the fact that the garments remained on the child during the early handling process. While this opens the possibility of the environmental transfer, it also underscores the importance of the first recorded observations made prior to the removal or contamination. Let's go into the second part with law enforcement and the pathologist's observations. In a supporting affidavit included with the 1996 search warrant, Detective Linda Arndt recalled observing Dr. Meyer during the external examination and noted his reaction to the discoloration found on the lower body area. According to the affidavit, Dr. Meyer verbally remarked that the reddish staining appeared to be consistent with some type of blood. Although this was not part of the official written autopsy language, it does provide a glimpse into how the findings were interpreted in real time. The actual language of the report stated several red areas of staining. But with Linda Arndt, he said maybe something more consistent with blood. And so while Linda Arndt was giving her perspective, he was also, as a pathologist, giving his. It does provide a glimpse into how the findings were interpreted in real time then. Detective Arndt also documented the use of the black light during the examination. She noted the glowing patterns were observed on the both the inner and the outer portions of the upper legs, which she initially believed could indicate the presence of biological fluids. However, subsequent lab testing reported no identification of such material on the body, clothing, or related samples. This distinction highlights that sometimes there's a wide gap between first impression and laboratory confirmed evidence. Nonetheless, the value of these early observations lies in their alignment. Both Dr. Meyer and Detective Arndt treated the discoloration as potentially meaningful and worthy of further investigation. These interpretations help establish continuity between the official findings in the report and the real-time assessments of those present at the initial examination. So all that to say that there is some sort of activity and maybe even some sort of troubling activity at this spot. Like we stated before, are we looking at a place where this is the aftermath of what had already taken place? Or was the body still releasing fluids? I think that's a question that needs to be, because, and, you know, whose fluids were these? And not only whose fluids were these, this leads us into a conversation about what I might call inappropriate activity. And as some of you may be aware of, in the interviews, John and Patsy were quite vocal and quite upset, quite shocked. I think Patsy said she was quite shocked that, first of all, this happened, and quite shocked that anyone would be mentioning this. But the fact of the matter remains that there is trauma around this area. And we have to understand where the trauma came from. If the body had been wiped, as the pathologist seems to suggest, was this part wiped clean? Or is this something that the examiner picked up on? It seems to be the case that these spots were visible. So even after wiping, it might seem, it seems that there was a cover up, but even after wiping, given the time allotted, it seems as if there was some residue still. That makes you wonder about timing. How fast? Okay, walk with me here. I'm trying to be as mindful as possible. How invasive? How invasive? Was this chronic? Was it chronic? If it was chronic, what would the fact that it, and this is maybe option one, what would the fact that it's chronic mean for this instance? If it was chronic, would the fluids be pouring out so easily or uncontrollably? Second question. If it wasn't chronic, that would make more sense to me, because maybe if this is the first time you breach something and fluids just begin pouring out because you've injured, there's been an injury to something, and there's been a breach to something. If you understand what I'm saying, you know what I'm saying. I think you understand what I'm saying. So if there has been a breach to this, and maybe it's the first time, and some of you are of the opinion that it's not. Some of you are of the opinion that this was having to do with sacrificial implications, is what you're of the opinion. So it wouldn't, in that case, it would be chronic. But let's say it's not chronic. If it's not chronic, then there would be gushing, maybe. I don't know. I don't know. I haven't looked this part up. So this is pure speculation on my part. I haven't looked this part up. But if it's not chronic, and this is maybe like the first time, and maybe you attach on something or you breach something that causes like a negative effect, to say the least, but the fluids start to spill out. The fluid starts to spill out. Let's say a red fluid starts to spill out. You understand what I'm saying? I would imagine that this might be alarming to the perpetrator. If this individual is experiencing, if the victim is experiencing the red fluid, then would this victim want to, I'm sorry guys, I was trying to be careful, but would this victim want to go and explain this to someone else and say, hey, look, this is what you do when you have red fluid? You go tell somebody, you get a Band-Aid. And maybe it's not malicious, but it's like, hey, you get a Band-Aid. I mean, you know what I mean? But you can imagine if that's the case, someone like the victim experiencing this sort of like this breach, right? And maybe they turn to run, or maybe they're convinced to do something else. Maybe they're convinced to stand there. Because we're still trying to understand how the neck apparatus works, where the neck apparatus comes in, right? Because I would be willing to concede that the neck apparatus is a little bit more or a little bit less aggressive of an interaction. It's a little bit less aggressive in response, and maybe the item force, let's call it an item force, maybe the item force instead is more of the aggressive act. Because as we talked about with the wrist apparatus, and I don't believe it was applied. I don't believe the wrist apparatus was applied prior to death. I think there may have been an application of the apparatus after. But if we think about the neck apparatus, then if an individual turns away, if it's already there on, and the individual turns away, it's not hard to the apparatus is not hard to adjust in a negative sense. It's not hard to adjust in a way that might not be beneficial to the victim. Such as to say that the victim could flee, but as the victim flees, there are barriers. Let's call them there is a barrier that stops the victim from fleeing in respect to the different apparatuses, to where the victim goes to run and the apparatus may just kind of, go the opposite direction, and prevent the individual from going upstairs. In which, if the individual turns from you, if the individual turns from you and is facing that way and is facing away from you, and this is your right hand, now the victim is at your right hand, So you both are at, and if the victim has sorry, I gotta be careful. Gotta be careful with my language. If the victim has um, some sort of um, impact to um, maybe the neck area, or maybe some sort of impact. Maybe there's an impact to the uh, the temple area, uh, and maybe the occipital area. And the occipital bone is, I think, kind of back here somewhere, something like that. So there's impact to the occipital area. 'Cause I need to, because I don't want to look through all this. But anyways, there is discussion about when we get into that part, and I'm going to talk about it. There's discussion about the occipital area, and I want to research more about that, because I want to know the exact impact to that, right? And I'm sorry I'm speaking in such coded language, but sometimes people don't like if I speak more directly. So if there's a big impact to the occipital area, that seems to attenuate, what I might say. It seems to like attenuate the more it goes. Like, say if it starts here and just kind of goes this direction, but as it goes from here to here, there is a sort of attenuation, if that makes sense. That means there's a reduction in I guess in this case it's going to be a reduction in size of impact, is what I'm saying. And so if you have a big impact closer to the back, but closer to the front, there's less of an impact. Then, of course, if somebody is like a foot in front of you, because that's all it could have been, 17 inches, give 3 inches for the head, you know, this thing was only, you know what I mean, 15 or 17 inches. The neck apparatus was only 17 inches. And this, we're going to talk about this more, because I have a specific section for this and everything. But if it's only this little thing, I know you can't see it in the camera, but let me kind of fold it so you can see. This is about 15 inches, right? Just the cord area. Now, the person, if you just in total length, just the person, maybe a little bit more. No. I'm lying. My phone is about 6.5 or 6.7 inches. So if I wrap this around twice, it should get us close. Yes, I'll say that. So almost just this much left is not there. So if you kind of think about from here to here, this is the length. This is kind of like the length. That's it. That there was between JonBenet and the perpetrator. That's the amount of space that she had. In the grand scheme of things, now if you subtract maybe 3 inches, 2 or 3 inches from this 17, you know, say you subtract 3 inches from the 17, that makes them even closer. That puts them even closer. So they had a lot of proximity. They were in close proximity. Like, I need you guys to understand just how close they were, right? And I'm going to show this for just a second because, like I said, look how flimsy this looks. It looks like, you know, when you get a package in, right? And I can't remember what that stuff is. It's this stuff like that. This is what, like, you see it on like packages and stuff, and it'd be like super flimsy. It reminds me of like this. I used to hate it. Seriously, I used to hate it because it was like it was so it was so hard to deal with because I couldn't just break it. But that's what that reminds me of. And obviously because they're made out of the same material, you know. But anyways, it's so flimsy looking, you know, and there's not a lot of room with respect to JonBenét's ability to maneuver or move around. And so when we're thinking about this, we're thinking about somebody that had to be close in proximity. And so let's move on to the or like very close, even behind. And because think about it, man. I'm starting to be of the opinion that JonBenet was standing up when this happened. And if she's standing up, then she's awake. She's awake when this is happening. And so to see the red fluid sort of flowing down your leg, maybe, it does beg the question of, if it's not chronic and you see the red blood, or I'm sorry, you see the, not blood, I'm sorry, you see the red, there's this kind of fluid that is sort of flowing. And it can get out of control. It can get out of control. Do you, as the person, respond immediately? What do you, as the person, or as the intruder, or as the perpetrator, do? Do you respond immediately and say, "Man, I gotta put the act is over. Whatever act that we were doing, it's over. I gotta put a stop to this." Or do you let it go? And then you begin to question, well, if this person maybe let it go, they didn't know to stop it. Maybe the fluid dispersion was a lot significantly more than what we see. Significantly more than what we see. Because you could have had sort of like an invasion of sorts, and whoever came after, if the first individual didn't understand or comprehend, like, hey, we got to put a stop to this. We can't just let the red fluid go. We got to put a stop to this. So they just wipe down, but there's still remnants. There's still residue from that even though it's not coming out in spurts anymore, it's still kind of, spotting or sort of like peppering or sprinkling, depending on how you move. So let's move forward. Biological and DNA analysis of the lower garment materials, forensic testing conducted by the CBI. So biological and DNA analysis of this garment. CBI tested this and identified traces of biological material on the undergarment. I think it was called Exhibit Number 7 in the CBI report. A follow-up sample taken from the exterior section between the two previously noted marks confirmed the presence of JonBenet's DNA. However, additional DNA indicators within the same garment revealed partial profiles pointing to a male contributor not genetically related to the Ramsey family. Subsequent testing by the Bodhi Technology revisited the same regions and examined nearby areas. While their direct sample from the interior portion yielded only the child's DNA, analysts acknowledged that the earlier mixture observed by the CBI might have been located just beyond the edge of the area they sampled. And so basically, I think this was something that Andy Hordita did, and or there are two people, Williamson and I can't pronounce the name. It's like a J name. When I see the name, I see it as Juggernaut, but I don't think that's the name. It's not. That's not her name, but it's Williamson and J something. Um, well, just as you could note on I think it's the report from the earliest report, 1230 of 96. You can see number 7, CBI number 7. Sorry. I'll probably have to, make this a little bit. I'll probably have to blur this a little bit. But you can see number 7 of the CBI report right here. And once we go down here and we look, examinations conducted the following exhibits did not indicate the presence of biological fluids. Number 7 is in that. So number 5 and number 6 and number 7. But red fluid was indicated on the following exhibits 5, 7, and 15, so on and so forth. I just wanted us to be on the same page. Amy JonBenet is what it is, not JonBenet. Amy, as far as I'm aware of, Amy JonBenet, JonBenet, and Andy Horita, CC Angela Williamson. So basically, Amy is saying, "Hi Andy, I've completed the testing from cuttings of the undergarments. At this point, I was not able to reproduce the mixture profile. Now, I want you to listen to the story of the unidentified male. This is in February of 2008. February of 2008. February. You understand me? February of 2008. Mary Lacey would have known this. Any news is what looks like Andy said at first. Amy says, "Hi Andy, I have completed the testing. I was not able to reproduce the mixture profile." Huh? "I only have data consistent with JonBenet with no indication of a mixture. From here, we could go back to the actual undergarments. It appears the area where the mixture DNA profile was obtained was on the edge of the cutting from the undergarments. We could match up the cutting and determine a larger area from the undergarment to cut. Going forward, what would you like the next steps to be?" And so on and so forth. Test this, test that, so on and so forth. I don't know if this was prior to or after. I think this was I don't know if this was an RE to an RE or a response or whatever, but he said, "Hi, Amy and Angela. Thanks for the update. Just to confirm, you used the identifier kit on the extraction from the 3 combined cuttings and found only the victim's profile. So running the mini filer would not be likely to produce any additional alleles, right? Since there was no indication of a male contributor, Y filer would probably not be useful at this point, right? The Denver lab, which is these are the ones who found who said that there was an unidentified male in the first place. They're the ones who sent the profile over. The Denver PD lab used a concentrated sample of an original extraction to develop this male profile. Would a higher concentration of the new extraction sample be useful? Would it be useful to rerun the concentration that Denver PD used to try to amplify the larger alleles with mini filer? I believe he retained the Regent Bank. I created a diagram attached showing the original cuttings and added labels A and B to try to identify and distinguish the areas that have been sampled. Was area A one of the areas you used? Based on the photos, it looks like there were 3 remaining areas of suspected staining, 2 in area A and 1 in area B. Is that correct? Were those the locations from which the latest extractions were made? We'd like to proceed with the Long John's testing next. Since there has not been information developed regarding anything other than possibly the paintbrush. I think that the swab testing should be secondary to the long johns. And so we kind of see here some confirmation of the paintbrush, of the use of the paintbrush here. And so what I'm saying is, boy, oh boy, oh boy. What I'm saying is, once you really stop and take a look, it should start to kind of make sense, because they're saying, hey, by the way, I can't get that unidentified male mixture again. And then Andy comes back and says, can you try this? Can you try this? Can you try in these? Which you should be doing. You should be saying, okay, can we look at it from all angles? But doesn't this, even if we should test some more, isn't this so far away from certainty? What are we talking about when we talk about DNA testing moving forward then? Yeah, because some of these things are coming back as a miss. Oh, there was an unidentified male profile found on it. Was it? Was it really? Are we sure about, are we sure about that? How certain would you say we are about the unidentified male DNA? How certain would you say we are? Because the forensic examiners are struggling with consistency there. Further analysis expanded beyond the original garment. DNA recovered from the child's secondary layer of clothing. The long johns showed a combination of her profile and genetic material from at least one unknown male. Although no match was identified, the findings were consistent with previous patterns of unaccounted for DNA contact. Of course, complications arose. Now, from what I can understand, they did say that there was something on the long johns. Now, because I think that report was this, because I think Andy was talking to them in February the 11th. This is March 24th. Yeah, February 11th of '08. Andy was talking, and so he was talking to them February. This is the March 24th report. And I thought this was funny. I was like, why are they doing that? But the testing of the Wednesday bloomies, you tested the Wednesday bloomies, and because this is, let's see, 2S07-10104, and I think what you go in here, you don't see any. You see a 05A, 05B, 05C, 05D. You see 06A, B, and C combined in process, partial DNA profile consistent with the victim. And so you don't really see any information for 04. Samples from these were not processed at this time. So we don't see anything with respect to 04. Maybe the wrist, because, and this was we were told why. I can't remember why here, but we were told why here, and then we goes on to the long johns and stuff like that, in terms of the long johns, nobody on, because they're still talking about the long johns associated with the following individuals. This one excludes JonBenet and somebody else. This excludes everyone. And then part B is where we've talked about this before. Burke and Patsy couldn't be excluded on that portion, which is part B. I believe here, top left half, couldn't be excluded or included. But anyways, complications arose when reconciling different rounds of testing. Some reports emphasized the undergarment marked Wednesday, while others pointed to a thermal layer as the key site, maybe to look for next, as we read in the email. One summary stated that a combination of the victim's DNA and the male DNA profile, origin unknown, was found on both the interior region and the leg band of the clothing. These profiles were analyzed using the STR techniques and entered into the CODIS national database. However, Boulder BPD, Boulder District Attorney's Office, later clarified that they had not received the full STR sequencing results for all family members at the time of the analysis, created an additional gap in the record. Adding further to the complexity in these results, then, a 2008 report from Amy stated that she was unable to reproduce anything. And so Andy kind of said, as we just saw, let's look at something else. So some of the confounding variables here that might have an issue, the surface cleaning, DNA mixtures, and interpretation limits. One of the more complex challenges in this case is the possibility that the body may have been wiped down prior to the examination. This suggestion, reportedly raised by Dr. Meyer during the initial visual assessment, has serious implications for how DNA evidence was recovered and interpreted. If the surface cleaning did occur, it could explain the patchy presence of genetic material, the absence of expected biological markers, and inconsistencies in the appearance of visible stains. So what I take that to mean, or what I was thinking, is that when you wipe down, you are kind of messing up the DNA. In some cases, you might just be smearing DNA, but you might also be wiping away DNA so that you're only getting partial prints or partial things. And so you're not getting the full picture of DNA. You might, as you're wiping down, you might be spreading DNA yourself. And so that might make it difficult, even though for right now, it looks like we could say, oh, there's a single lone male DNA contributor. Trying to get that consistently, and because it might have to be on that one spot. You see what I'm saying? And so that becomes kind of the trouble that we walk into. Patsy Ramsey denied ever witnessing. I think I want to touch this. The medical team's decision to swab multiple. So the medical team's decision to swab multiple areas during the examination suggests concerns about potential inappropriate contact were considered seriously. However, what followed was a wide gap between early impressions and the formal lab confirmations, which continues to cloud clear interpretation. This disconnect is mirrored in the reactions of JonBenet's parents, John and Patsy Ramsey, displaying visible discomfort and emotional resistance when questioned about medical findings involving the lower body. John referred to these specific injuries, and he responded or referred to these specific injuries, describing them as deeply disturbing. He repeatedly stated that he could not bring himself to review the full pathologist report, and denied any family involvement in the wrongdoing of what happened to JonBenet. Patsy also denied ever witnessing questionable behavior from others or anything that could be perceived as inappropriate toward the victim. Yet, during investigative interviews, questions were raised about a dark-colored fiber, in which, man, I think they asked Patsy about it, but I think they also asked John about it. John flew off the handle, man. He didn't even let him finish. Consistent with the black garment belonging to someone in the household. And they said, John Ramsey, they said, hey, look, we got a black fiber from John that was found. What do you think about that? Oh, nah. But you see, they were looking at the pathologist's report, and they were asking questions with respect to the pathologist's report. And Patsy and John were getting mad that they said, you gave me, you guys didn't want to look at anybody else. You gave me a black shirt. There were dark fibers found in the area. What do you want me to ask? Do I need to go find other people with black shirts? I just need to go. You didn't even ask anybody else. Do you want me to just start traveling around Colorado looking for people wearing a black shirt? Come on, man. These inquiries remained unresolved during the interviews due to legal advisement, leaving another gap in the chain of accountability. And this is where the lawyers jumped in and said, we ain't doing that. We're not doing that. Taken together, these inconsistencies in the forensic testing, coupled with emotionally charged responses and legal non-disclosures, deepened the overall ambiguity of the case. These overlapping uncertainties, both psychological and procedural, continue to limit the ability to form a cohesive narrative from the available evidence. So one point of discussion that I do want to mention, I have three. The first one is the discoloration noted on the inner portion of the body in the initial report, interpreted by some experts as consistent with biological staining, remains one of the earliest physical indicators that there may have been, and the scientific testing that followed, producing inconclusive results around it. It's difficult, but the initial pathology, kind of looking at it and saying, okay, if we can't test anything else or do anything else, there is something that happened here. Maybe it happened up here, but it sort of trickled down here, because I would really like to know, where on the Barbie nightgown the red fluid was found. That's what I would like to know. Where on the Barbie nightgown was the red fluid found? Because again, this is the thing about the Barbie nightgown. I know people are like, oh, it was found in the dryer stuck to a sheet. That does not matter. It had blood on it. So apparently at some point in time, somebody took it out of the dryer, took it away from the sheet, and used it in the crime. At some point in time, they pulled it out of the dryer and said, hey, we need this for this criminal activity. That's what they said. That's why I'm not talking about it being in the dryer. If it was found in the dryer, cool, or whatever. Somebody went and picked it up, pulled it out, or just whatever they did. But somebody said this was, if it was in the dryer, because if Linda Hoffman Pugh, and I haven't seen it, but I'll trust you. If Linda is saying, hey, that nightgown was in the dryer, I put that nightgown in the dryer, that's where it should have been, then somebody could have been one of two things. Could have been that Patsy did find the nightgown right before putting JonBenet to bed. She did find the nightgown and then put it on her, put her to bed, put it on her, and then laid her down. JonBenet used the restroom, got up in the middle of the night, used the restroom on it, came down looking for mom, said, hey mom, I used the restroom on myself, or what have you, looking for her and stuff like that, and said, oh baby, I'm packing, whatever. Could have been the case. I'm just, hypothesizing here. But also, it could have stayed in the washer and the dryer, or could have stayed in the dryer, and then later on, when something happened, somebody ran up there, but it would have already had to been close, because when we're talking about an intruder, I want you to think long and hard with me. Why would the intruder know the Barbie nightgown was in the dryer? Why would they know that? And even if it was in the dryer, who cares? Even if it was in the dryer, why would I go get that? This suggests intimate knowledge. This is not intimate knowledge about John. Even if you look at the ransom note, this is not intimate knowledge about John. This is intimate knowledge about JonBenet. Oh, they knew that this was her favorite blankie. This was her favorite. They knew where she slept. This was her favorite. They knew what stairs to go up to pick her up. This was her favorite blanket. This was her favorite stuffed animal, or what have you. This is intimate knowledge about JonBenet. This relationship is not about John. I don't care who you wrote the ransom note to. This relationship is not about John. You can forget that. It's not about John, and it's not about Patsy. John was like, oh, somebody must have been mad at me. No, they weren't. No, they were not. Somebody had a problem with JonBenet, because if somebody is going and using JonBenet stuff to frame, because if somebody was mad at John, then they would have used John's stuff to frame John in what happened to JonBenet. Why would, if I'm mad at John and I really want to get him back, and I'm crazy enough to write some stuff like, if you do this, this happens. If you do this, then this happens. Talk to a stray dog, boom. Do this, you call the cops, boom. If I'm mad at John, I'm going and getting John's coat and I'm putting it right down there in the wine cellar. If I'm mad at John. But that ain't what happened. They surrounded JonBenet with her own stuff that she liked. And you're telling me that they're mad at you? Oh, absolutely not. They are mad at JonBenet because JonBenet is surrounded with her stuff, almost to make it seem like, because it doesn't make sense. It makes sense when you're rushing, but it doesn't make sense when you're by yourself. And it doesn't make sense when when you're rushing, yes, but it doesn't make sense to think that if this is somebody who was able to take his time walking through the house, they just kind of say, okay, pick up all your things that you like, because that's essentially what you would have to tell JonBenet. Pick up all the things that you like. And to figure that JonBenet was probably standing up when this happened, or she was wide awake and engaged when this happened. That's what I'm saying. She had to be wide awake and engaged when this happened, in my view. Something like that. Engaged in some way when this happened. So the person's like, get your nightgown, get this, get that. They would have had to go up and stop by the washer dryer. What criminal is going to take a stop by, even if he's in there for hours? What criminal is going to stop by the washer and dryer for what? To pick out the favorite things. Who's going to do that? Other than somebody intimate, somebody who is able to quickly collect. Look, there's too many things that are quickly collected and put together to create a story, to create a narrative. Look, this is her this is her that, this is her this belongs. It's too many of those things that belong specifically to her for us to even believe that they're mad at John over something. It doesn't work. It's not going to happen. So this person was mad at JonBenet. This person, as we showed with this, was very close to JonBenet. Maybe even behind JonBenet. Somewhat, I would say, in a controlling position of JonBenet. Right? Having sort of their own ability to impose something. Right? And so in that regard, we're not talking about somebody who may have, done something malicious. In that case, we've talked about not malicious. We've talked about something, let's call it aggressive. We talked about an aggressive example, but maybe there's a less aggressive example to where you take maybe the person, and the person is kind of walking this way and I'm behind them pulling this way. You see what I'm saying? And so if I'm playing too much, if I only have playing on my mind, and this person is going this way, ha 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 ha, things could get out of hand. But I'm in close proximity with the victim in front of me. You see what I'm saying? And if there are sprinkler spots, that means that you did not clean up thoroughly, because I could still see it. That means you didn't know too much, because what criminal knows enough to wipe down but doesn't know how to clean it thoroughly? What criminal is going to do that? Amateur. This is an amateur work here. This is not somebody. Why are we looking for people who? Why are you having me look for people who may have? Look for these known offenders. Why? Wouldn't a known offender know what they're doing? Have you ever watched those shows of known offenders? Huh? Do you know what they do once they get caught? They get real cautious. They get real careful. Some of them are so good, and it's sickening, but some of them are so good that when you start using certain language, they're like, oh, I'm out. Dip. They won't say anything to you for 3 weeks. But their nature brings them back because they're hungry for this interaction. And so that nature brings them back, even though they know it's trouble. They flirt with that line, but they're asking, oh, I don't want no, and they try to start using, language. Oh, yeah, I just want to be your friend. Can you introduce me to your mom? And, oh, no, I don't think there's anything wrong with us being friends. Kind of very clouded, and shrouded language, to throw investigators off as to your real intent. They start getting smarter over time. If this person has done this several times, and then they start getting smarter, right? Even if they've watched the shows, this person was an amateur and they had something against JonBenet. Otherwise, this wouldn't have come out. They wouldn't have done that. They would have needed to, if they really didn't like John. And if they really didn't like John, they would have used John. They would have tried to frame John and say, if they had that in mind, then they would have set the stage for this act. And they would have been like, okay, boom, here's John's coat. Here's this, here's that. And they would have laid it all down there. And you would have saw John's coat in the wine cellar. Right? So I want to close by saying that I'll just leave the other points as they are. I want to close by saying this. The findings from the lower garment area in JonBenet Ramsey case suggest the presence of trauma, possible interference, and ongoing uncertainty in forensic interpretation. The visual documentation of staining, the examiner's real-time assessment that it resembles red fluid, and the recurring appearance of the unidentified male DNA, or I wouldn't even say recurring appearance. The appearance of the unidentified DNA seemed to form a body of evidence. But as I said, that DNA you start to have questions about that DNA. Although laboratories were unable to confirm certain biological elements conclusively, the fact that you first have this partial profile, but then the partial profile seems to go away and you can't even find, and even when you did get the partial profile, it's not even in the database, might suggest that we're going back toward an internal look. If I should say, we're going back toward an internal look because we can't even use the unidentified DNA, male DNA anymore. We can't even use that anymore. We got to look internally now. So that's what I'm saying. We might not even be able to use the unidentified male DNA anymore. We might have to look internally. So that's, I think, everything that I want to talk about. Let me know what you think. Like, share, subscribe. Appreciate your love and respect and whatnot. And hope all is going well for everyone. And until next time, take it easy.